Not doing this. In my head. Hey everybody, welcome to In My Head. Two quick things. Number one, I am from the United States of America, so if you're from a different culture, the things I say here, they may not apply equally to you. Number two, I am not a licensed professional. I don't like people. Just leave me alone. You do things your way, I'll do things my way. I'm fine. I don't want to talk about it. Well, it's true. Maybe you don't want to talk about it, but avoidant behavior affects your life, and avoidant behavior can ruin your relationship. So it's important that at least right now we talk about it. Here on In My Head, I give my take on what's going on and how it relates to our mental health and our lives, and we go from there. The first thing that I want to make absolutely clear is that avoidant behavior is normal. It's normal to avoid things. We have to avoid things that are going to hurt us. We have to avoid things that will be painful. That's normal. It's adaptive to life to be avoiding things. And just thinking about it, going through our day-to-day, when we approach some things, that's kind of the opposite of avoidance, is approaching. When you approach something, you're just naturally avoiding the thing that you're not approaching. So we may even be avoiding things kind of like accidentally. Now, avoidance is adaptive, but when it becomes maladaptive, when it's not helping us, is when it becomes a pattern and it becomes the way that we react to certain things, or maybe even the way we react to everything. When we're not becoming adaptive, we're avoiding and we're becoming less resilient and less able to live in the world. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to become some kind of like ultra resilient person, and it doesn't mean that we have to always go towards things that we're afraid of. It's natural to be afraid of some things, but we should have a toolbox of coping skills that can help us be resilient and adapt when something stressful happens. Sorry, I'm busy. Don't touch me. I'm staying home. Me, scared? Yeah, right. Blocking the haters. So let's talk about coping skills. Coping skills can be things like you might find in dialectical behavior therapy, also known as DBT. We might learn to do things like meditate. We may challenge ourselves to think the opposite of the negative thoughts we might be thinking about ourselves or others. We may learn to tune into how we're feeling and to breathe when we're experiencing those stressful times, to open up and slow down our breathing. And one of the most helpful things we can do, we may make friends with people and get resources like a therapist or other people involved in our lives that we can rely on when we experience stress. Okay, just breathe. Things will be okay. I can do this. When we're talking about avoidance, the thing that we're trying to avoid is usually not coming from outside of us, and we get tripped up a lot about this. It's true that things that are going on around us affect us, but it's usually the internal experience of anxiety or fear that we're trying to avoid. Now, fear is natural. We should be afraid of certain things. We're all born being afraid to fall, and we're afraid of loud noises. That's just born into us. We also learn to become afraid of things as we go through life. We might have a fear of things like fire, flying, and heights, a fear of insects. And these are all common fears, and generally they're not going to cause enough stress in our life that we have to be concerned about them. Sometimes they do, though. When it comes to avoidance, we're generally not so much concerned about fear. We're more concerned about anxiety. Anxiety is when you have that feeling of fear and an anticipation that something bad is about to happen, when in reality, looking around, nothing is happening. It's kind of like our brain goes a few steps ahead and sees the future, but we can't see the future. We don't know what's going to happen. Our brains are, wired to predict and anticipate things. That's normal. But there's times when that mechanism in our brain isn't working correctly. And when that's going on, we start to see things that aren't really happening as if they are happening, or we experience them as happening when they're really not. We see this a lot during trauma. He's coming over here. He's going to think I'm stupid. He's going to hurt me. I have to leave. So what does all this have to do with relationships? Well, if you're avoiding that feeling of anxiety, that can really get in the way of a relationship. In any relationship, you need to be able to communicate the way you're feeling to somebody. And in order to communicate how you're feeling, You have to go ahead and experience the feeling first. You can't avoid it. This is especially true the more intimate that a relationship becomes, starting from acquaintances, moving towards friendships, and then intimate lovers. The closer that we get to people, both physically and emotionally, the more vulnerable we have to be, and the more we have to communicate the way that we're feeling so that we can be safe. Now, this gets tricky because sometimes we look like we're experiencing our emotions, and we may even believe that we're experiencing our emotions in the way that we're feeling. But when it comes to it, what we're actually doing is mimicking. We're pretending to be feeling one emotion because it helps us to avoid the actual feeling of anxiety that's inside of us. I hope someone sees me and comforts me. I'm really scared. I don't want to be alone. I want them to love me. We might even avoid kind feelings towards ourselves. We might avoid compliments and thinking positively about ourselves because of a past experience. Stop it, I'm ugly. Sorry, I'm an idiot. Everybody only cares about themselves. This world is messed up. The way that we're experiencing our emotions can sometimes get mixed up because we start to cross things that are positive and negative, and we start acting in kind of weird ways. Because we're avoiding the way that we actually feel at the core, we start mixing up the way that we feel, and we may start to seek out harmful things instead of seeking out positive and good things. We start to act in a way that's inauthentic to what we're actually feeling. It's kind of like we don't have a navigation system because we're avoiding the navigation system that we already have built in our emotions. Where's the party at? Oh, he's cute. I wonder what he's doing later tonight. Let's go do something crazy. Now, all of this stuff, to me, I think it should be explored in therapy. Some of it can be explored with our friends and our family, but a lot of this avoidance behavior is really hard stuff. This is especially true if it becomes so much of a pattern that you avoid social interactions with people. It's really hard to have a relationship if you just avoid people altogether, and that would be something we might see in something like avoidant personality disorder. So naturally, when you're afraid of people, a therapist is going to understand that. A therapist is going to know you are not comfortable being around them, and that's okay. That's what they're there for. They should be able to explore things with you and create a safe environment that you start to become comfortable with them. Now, I know a lot of people, they go to therapy, they have a bad therapist. I've had bad therapists. Please don't use having a bad experience with one or even 2 or 3 therapists as a reason to give up on therapy altogether. Sometimes we just need to keep trying until we find the right fit. Some people maybe aren't as skilled in the areas that we need help with. Some people, maybe we're just not comfortable around them. Maybe we need specifically to see a man or a woman or somebody who's in a particular part of town or whatever it is. We all have our own hang-ups. It's particularly hard when you avoid things because you're going to want to avoid therapy. But that's the problem that you're trying to work on, and the therapist is the one who's going to be able to help you with it. I'm not really comfortable being here, but here I am. So here's the thing. We all avoid things. It's normal. It's part of life. Life is scary. Life is hard. It's also beautiful and wonderful, but it's hard. And people can be scary too. Getting more and more intimate into closer relationships with people is scary. You have to learn more about yourself, and you have to learn about them, and you have to be vulnerable. It's a little bit natural to be afraid of these things. But we got to remember that not everybody on this earth is here to harm us. And those feelings that we're experiencing inside, even though some of them feel awful, they feel scary, they're not necessarily even there to harm us either. They're there to inform us. Remember that inside every one of us, there is a caring part. There is a kind part. There is a part that wants to listen. And yes, inside of you, there is a loving person. We just have to learn to stop avoiding those beautiful parts of ourselves. Now, if you're somebody who has trouble with all of this, I recommend going in and seeing a therapist. But if you just want something to kind of get you thinking about it, I have some free worksheets over on my Patreon page on self-esteem, on setting boundaries, on stress regulation, and how you might be able to cope. Patreon is a place where you can help somebody like me to do what they're doing. So in my case, you help me to make more videos that humanize mental health. And thank you to my patrons who are already doing that. I myself use Patreon to support other creators. If you want to learn more about avoidance, I did a whole bunch of videos this week. Go over to youtube.com/RyanLiberty, hit subscribe. And I'm going to challenge you here to be a little bit brave. What is something that you maybe have avoided in the past, but you learned after experiencing it that it wasn't really that scary, that you didn't really need to be avoiding it? Share your stories of bravery down below. I'd love for us to learn from each other. Thank you everybody for joining me here on In My Head. All right, I'll give it a try. Hey everybody,